Stone Cold Steve Austin never wasted words, and whenever he called someone out, he had a reason. These wrestlers didn't just clash with him in the ring, they broke codes, crossed lines, or simply got on his bad side. And when you're dealing with a man who once walked out on Vince McMahon at the peak of his career, a grudge like that hits different. Back in 1998 on Raw, Stone Cold flipped the double bird right in Jeff Jarrett's face. Jarrett had just returned to WWE thinking he'd feud with Austin and cut a reckless promo, calling Steve a washed-up ringmaster and mocking Austin 316, which was practically blasphemy. Austin had no warning about the segment, and backstage Vince Russo said Steve's face turned blood red before he tore into Jarrett, yelling that he was messing with his livelihood and demanding, "Never book me with that guy," for Austin. This wasn't just business, it was personal. It went back to the Memphis days in the early 90s when Austin was grinding for scraps while Jeff coasted on the promoter's dime. One night, Jarrett passed by and mocked him, saying, "Keep staring at that paycheck, boy. It ain't getting any bigger." Those insults stuck with Austin. And Jarrett's 1997 promo was the last straw. Austin saw it as Jarrett trying to ride his momentum and reopen old wounds. He refused to work with him, and when Russo tried again 6 months later, Austin shut it down. Jarrett was completely removed from Stone Cold's path. Austin later said Jarrett lacked the toughness for a feud and would have dragged him down. What could have been a major storyline turned into a long-term refusal, and years later Jarrett admitted a feud with Austin could have changed his WWE career. But in Austin's mind, disrespecting Austin 316 wasn't just a storyline issue, it made you persona non grata. You either took a stunner or worse, you didn't get to work with Austin at all. Moving on, before he was flipping birds and dropping stunners, Steve Austin was stunning Steve in Duck W until Eric Bischoff decided he was dead weight. In 1995, while rehabbing a torn tricep, Austin was fired in the coldest way possible, not with a call or meeting, but by FedEx. Bischoff claimed Austin was unmarketable, but Austin called that BS. He didn't just sit around angry, he went to ECW, grabbed a mic, and unleashed savage late-night rants that buried Bischoff and anyone who sided with him. He mocked Nitro as Monday Night Nickel and said his firing went through a secretary relay before he got the news over the phone. His rage was real, but his sarcasm was sharp. Austin revealed he had pitched matches with Sting and Hulk Hogan, but was always shut down. He called Bischoff blind and said that after being fired, his phone didn't stop ringing. What burned him wasn't just being let go, it was how cheap it felt. After busting his ass for Duck W, he got a pink slip in a box. That slap in the face lit the fire that created the anti-authority Stone Cold persona. Bischoff would later admit firing Austin by FedEx was a mistake, but he still blamed it on Austin's attitude problem. Austin hated being underpaid and overlooked. And years later he brought Eric Bischoff onto his podcast. There was no shouting match, but no forgiveness either. You could see Steve smirking as if to say, "Yeah, Eric, how's that decision holding up?" Eventually, they worked together when Bischoff came to WWE in 2003, and Austin got to hit him with stunners, which must have felt incredibly satisfying. Time cooled things off, but back in the late 90s, Austin flat out hated Bischoff. Imagine Bischoff in 1998, watching Austin light up arenas, hearing the glass shatter, and knowing he had handed Vince McMahon the Attitude Era on a silver platter. Austin's grudge wasn't just personal, it felt like poetic justice. Bischoff had passed on the next big thing and then got roasted for it on ECW TV and again in WWE. Sometimes karma wears jorts and drinks beer. Fast forward to 2002, WWE was preparing Brock Lesnar, 280 pounds of freakish Minnesota muscle, to be the next big thing. Vince had the whole plan ready, a King of the Ring win, a monster push, everything. Then came the pitch: Lesnar versus Stone Cold live on Raw. No build-up, no storyline, just a clean win for the rookie. For Austin, that was like being asked to shotgun warm beer. Jim Ross made the call and explained the plan while Austin sat in a hotel, drinking whiskey and wondering who had lost their mind. Austin's reply was simple: "If that's creative, I ain't going to be there." He thought Vince would back down, but Vince stood firm. No big story, no feud, just Steve losing to Brock. On Monday night, Austin waited for some kind of twist to make it worthwhile, but it never came. So Austin quietly walked out. No promo, no backstage blow up, just gone. He didn't hate Brock Lesnar. He hated the idea. Giving away a dream match with no build on free TV felt like a waste. Austin believed Lesnar vs. Austin could headline pay-per-views and make huge money, but WWE wanted to throw it away as a random Raw match. His pride instincts and old-school mindset all screamed no, so he left for 8 months. WWE didn't take that lightly and hit back fast. WWE spun Austin's walkout as him abandoning the fans, and The Rock even cut a promo calling him out. For a moment, it felt like Austin might never return. Years later, Austin admitted he was wrong. He called it the worst decision of his career, saying he was being stubborn and didn't offer a solution, he just said no. He learned from it. There was never any real beef with Brock, just bad timing and bad booking. They never got their one-on-one match. It was teased a few times, and Austin even hosted a panel and podcast with Brock, but by then the match didn't need to happen. Austin respects Lesnar, often calling him a draw, a beast, and the real deal. Brock understood too, saying it was just business. But back then, Austin felt like he was being sacrificed to a rookie with no build, no warning, and no good reason, so he refused. The lesson? If you pitch a bad idea at 2 a.m., be ready to lose your top star by breakfast. Now for one of the more bizarre moments. Remember Jonathan Coachman, the goofy announcer who became a heel stooge in the early 2000s? In 2005, WWE actually pitched a match: Stone Cold Steve Austin vs. Coachman. Not a joke. The story was that Coach helped fire Jim Ross on TV, and Austin, loyal to JR, was supposed to show up at Taboo Tuesday and beat Coach to win JR's job back. On paper, it was meant to be harmless. Austin stomps Coach, drinks a beer, fans go home happy. But then came the changes, interference, a messy finish, maybe even Coach winning with help from Vader or Mark Henry. According to Coachman, Austin thought the whole match was beneath him. On show night, Austin didn't show up. Fans instead got Batista, who came out and destroyed Coach. Austin was reportedly nursing a knee injury, but it was clear he wasn't coming. From Austin's perspective, selling even a single punch for Coach was insulting. He had gone toe-to-toe with The Rock and The Undertaker, and now they wanted him bumping for an announcer? Coach later said he was disappointed but understood Austin's stardom. He just felt ghosted. The match with Coach ended up being a low point, and even Coach admitted it wasn't one of Austin's finest moments. There was no bad blood afterward, but it still stung. By 2005, Austin was semi-retired and chose his appearances carefully. He probably agreed to the Taboo Tuesday spot expecting a quick, fun cameo, not a potential loss to a comedy heel. Word is, Austin refused to lose, even with outside interference planned. WWE didn't back down, so he walked, and his contract quietly expired soon after. Austin and Coach never worked together again, though years later when they crossed paths, things were friendly. The match was simply dead and buried. In the big picture, this wasn't some major grudge, just a clash of ego versus creative. Austin was protecting his character, even if it meant skipping the show entirely. And honestly, Coach might have gotten the better deal, getting squashed by Batista beats being humiliated by a furious Stone Cold in front of a live crowd. Coach stayed humble and kept his head down. The next time that glass shattered. By early 2002, Steve Austin was still red hot in WWE, but his patience was running thin. Ender Scott Hall, aka Razor Ramon, returning alongside Hogan and Nash as the new. Austin was paired with Hall heading into WrestleMania 18. It wasn't Rock versus Hogan, but Hall was a big name and the company needed something for Austin. The build was ice cold though. The best moment of the feud came when Austin tied Hall to a chair and drenched him with beer on SmackDown, which pretty much said it all. Backstage, Austin was annoyed for 2 reasons. First, he wanted Hogan, but Hulk worked his magic and got himself booked against The Rock instead. Second, Hall was struggling with personal issues, and Austin didn't trust him to deliver on the WrestleMania stage. Come WrestleMania 18 in Toronto, the plan at one point was for Hall to beat Austin. Then Hall showed up looking rough, like Minibar Massacre rough. Austin took one look and said, "Nope." Jim Ross later said Austin outright demanded the finish be changed because Hall didn't look like he could beat anyone. Vince agreed, maybe already planning to change it anyway. So Austin gave him to stunners. Because when your opponent has been drinking, better safe than sorry. The match was short, and Hall's wild bump off the stunner was the only real highlight. Afterward, there was no after party, no Raw appearance. Austin skipped everything, officially citing exhaustion. The truth was, he was just over it. That whole WrestleMania situation pushed him even closer to walking out a few months later. He didn't trust Hall, didn't like the creative direction, and felt like the company was taking him for granted. JR said it best. The angle felt thrown together, and Hall's baggage dragged it down. Austin showed up ready to go, but Hall, not so much. Imagine being Steve Austin, laser-focused, arriving at WrestleMania only to see your opponent looking like last call at a dive bar and he's supposed to beat you. Not happening. Hall took the stunner and sold it like he'd been hit with a cattle prod, flying across the ring in one of the wildest bumps of the night. The crowd loved it, but Austin was probably just glad it was over. Skipping Raw the next night wasn't about exhaustion, it was pure disgust. This was a clash of two careers heading in opposite directions. Austin was still trying to uphold his standard, while Hall was running on reputation and fumes, stumbling into WrestleMania unprepared. Austin wasn't going to let that slide, so he did his job, hit the stunners, and left. Now imagine Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Hulk Hogan. Just saying, it feels like calling on the wrestling gods. The biggest star of the 90s versus the biggest star of the 80s, a dream match that somehow never left fantasybooking.so. Why didn't it happen? One word: ego. Mix in some creative tension, backstage mistrust, and you've got the recipe for a missed classic. These two legends barely crossed paths. When Hogan was headlining the 80s, Austin was grinding it out in Texas. When Austin blew up during the Attitude Era, Hogan was in WWE spray painting belts and pulling strings behind the scenes. Two alpha dogs, two separate yards. Fast forward to 2000 to Hogan's back in WWE. The internal plan was Rock versus Hogan first at WrestleMania 18. Then build toward Austin versus Hogan. WWE even teased it with that backstage SmackDown segment where Hogan offered Austin a beer, which got a huge pop, but nothing came of it. Backstage, it was all politics. Bruce Pritchard has said he doesn't think Austin and Hogan disliked each other. It was just timing and positioning. Translation: neither man wanted to take the loss. Austin, being old school, would take the L if it made sense, but by 2002 he wasn't convinced Hogan could go in the ring. Hogan was too slow, too beat up, and Austin's own neck wasn't great either. Plus, both were baby faces, so there was no clear story to tell. Maybe Austin watched Rock vs. Hogan and thought, damn, that should have been me. Or maybe, no way I'm getting that kind of reaction. Either way, he wasn't pushing for it. And Hogan wasn't banging on doors to make it happen either. On camera, Austin and Hogan have always been polite, and years later Austin even called Hogan to clear the air about whatever tension might have lingered. But let's be real, there was some static. When Hogan came to WWE in 1994, Austin and several others got pushed to the sidelines, and not long after, Austin was released. Hogan, as usual, likely pitched his "we'll tear it down, brother, but I go over first" plan, fully knowing it would be a one-and-done match with no rematch in sight. Jim Ross backed Austin's decision, saying Austin was never going to sign on for something he didn't believe in. By the time anyone got serious about making the match happen, the window had already closed. Publicly, Austin has always said there's no heat and it just didn't work out, insisting he respects Hogan. But let's be honest, if everything was so perfect, why did Austin skip the 2006 Hall of Fame ceremony just because Hogan was there? The fact that Austin eventually reached out to clear the air tells you there was something to clear. Both men probably knew the match couldn't live up to the hype, and neither wanted to be the one to take a clean loss. So here we are, left with fantasy booking. In my head, Austin hits a stunner, Hogan hulks up, Austin flips him off mid-hulk up, Hogan freezes, second stunner, 1-3. In Hogan's head, he drops the leg, pins Austin clean, and poses over the body. These days, the two are cool, but back when it mattered, ego killed the dream. Now let's talk about Shane Douglas, a man who is basically a walking shoot interview with a minor in grudges and a PAHDADDDDHEHE in backstage bitterness. He's spent decades flaming everyone from Ric Flair to Vince McMahon, and yes, he's taken shots at Stone Cold Steve Austin too. The funny part is he and Austin barely shared any spotlight. Back in WWE in '92, they were tag partners for a short time. Douglas was the rookie. Austin the rising star, and they even had a solid tag feud with Austin and Brian Pillman versus Douglas and Ricky Steamboat. Fast forward to ECW in '95, Austin showed up as a guest while Shane was the franchise. That was about it. Still, Douglas developed a massive chip on his shoulder watching Austin become the biggest star in wrestling. His complaint? That Austin was a copycat. According to Shane, Austin stole pieces of ECW, the beer drinking from Sandman, the tough guy attitude from Taz, and the Andy Authority promos from Shane himself. But peel back the layers and it just sounds like a classic case of that should have been me. The truth is Austin barely acknowledged Douglas. He even invited him on his podcast in 2014 for a friendly conversation. There was no beef, just two veterans swapping stories, with Austin even giving Shane his props. If this was a grudge, it was entirely one-sided. Douglas always had bigger axes to grind anyway, spending years blasting the Clique and Ric Flair for holding him back. At one point, he even claimed certain guys blocked his WWE return in 2001. Maybe